In today's episode, my guest is Armoo. He is the founder and CEO of Fanbytes, a social media influencer agency, which he recently sold for tens of millions of pounds. He's only 27 years old and he already achieved massive success in business. So during the episode, I really tried to understand what makes him successful and how he approaches building a business. And we talk a lot about mindset and skills and the opportunities that he sees. And we just kind of discuss a bunch of potential business opportunities right now. He lays out his blueprint for building a business that you can sell for tens of millions of pounds. We talk about some more philosophical questions about what is wealth, etc., etc. So I think it was really cool and I hope you're going to enjoy it. And if you do, as always, please leave a review on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever it is that you're listening to this. I really appreciate that. It helps spread the word and it helps me bring even more interesting guests to the podcast. Thanks. All right. Timo, welcome to the Founders Lounge.
What's up? This is cool. The Founders Lounge is quite a good name, by the way. The Founders
It's a
Lounge.
good name, right? That's what I thought. I thought it would be catchy and attractive for the type of audience that I would like to attract with it.
Yeah.
So, and for the type of guests as well. Like, who doesn't want to come to the Founders Lounge, right?
It reminds me of that time that I got you guys to my house and I called it the Founders House.
Dude, 100%.
The Founders House, yeah.
100%. It's been a while, so I'm excited to catch up with you, man. Just on life, and you had a lot going on in the last year or so. And I don't want to go too much into your story because there are dozens, if not probably hundreds, of articles and podcasts about you and your story and your the recent business acquisition. But still, just a little bit for everyone who doesn't know you or anyone, just to kind of set the ground.
Yeah.
If you give a quick who you are and your business and.
Yeah, cool. Let's roll. We'll make this 60 seconds. So my name is Timo Armoo. I am 27 years old. As you can tell from my accent, I'm in London. I have been building companies for a while. I started my first project, not even a serious company. I started my first project at 14. I then started really in the world of media. And in the world of media, I built a media publication at 17, which I sold after 11 months. And then 4 years afterwards, and that acquisition was not anything grandiose. It was just like a nice six-figure acquisition. But at 17, I was like, oh my God, this whole world of media is the way that I want to live my life. And then at 21, I started a company called Fanbytes, which was all around helping brands to run influencer campaigns. I started at my second year of university, and over the last 5.5 years, 6 years, I basically built a team up from myself to a team of 70 people. And at the beginning of this year, specifically in May, we announced that the company had just been acquired for tens of millions. And so there you go. That's the whistle-stop tour of my life.
There you go. That's a quick story, and then there are like 100 different points that we can talk about. I think so. You built Fanbytes specifically to be acquired, right? You basically built it to sell. How do you look at that differently? Like how you build something to sell versus building something just to run it or to hold it, to own it indefinitely? Especially because your business essentially was an agency, right?
Yeah. So that perhaps is part of it, which is we built a lot of tech and IP, and that was by design because I knew that agency businesses were generally valued as a multiple of their profit and their EBITDA. But I was very intentional in saying, actually, we built a lot of tech, and tech helps us to scale. And so we got a very, good valuation. We got a very good multiple, primarily because we had built a company which revenue was growing incredibly fast. Every year on average, we're growing like 180% or something like that. And that's revenue. And then they have tech, which is allowing them to scale. And then they have IP and all that stuff, which is also adding in a moat. And that was all by design. I mean, another thing is we raised money. Now, in hindsight, we didn't raise a ton of money, but again, that was by design because I knew that the outcome that I wanted was not an acquisition in like the hundreds of millions. Actually, it was an acquisition. And I know I can't directly share the acquisition price, but it's been shared somewhere on Google. So if you want to Google it, you can find it to those who are listening. But it was somewhere between 10 and 99 million. 10 and 100 million. We raised angel money and we raised from a specific type of investor because I knew specifically the type of outcome that I wanted to have. So I think those were some of the decision making framework that I used in order to almost like set up the business to sell. Or, for example, I focused on a particular niche that I knew was growing and that would eventually get consolidated. Because this happens with every medium, right? We built a company in the influencer space, but if you look at social ads, TV, radio, even out of home advertising, all of them start off as like silo things, and then after a while they then like just become consolidated. And so I knew there'll be a time for consolidation in the industry. I knew that would actually happen, and so part of it was if we ride this wave and we just don't die basically, then there will definitely be the opportunity for that.
Today's episode is sponsored by freelancer.com, the largest online marketplace for freelancing and crowdsourcing. If you want to delegate some of your work or need to hire an expert in virtually any skill, then this is the place for you. There are over 60 million freelancers, so you can find anything you want. I'm currently using it to get some cool new stuff done for the podcast. Even NASA has been using it for years, which is pretty cool. If you want to give it a try, go to freelancer.tflpod.co and you'll get a £30 voucher to get started with your first project. So that's freelancer.tflpod.co. I'll put the link in the description. Nice. So that's pretty much the blueprint that you laid out if you want to build something for acquisition, right? What the kind of steps or the kind of business that you need to build. So obviously, as you said, you're 27 years old. You've built an incredibly successful business, sold it. For your age, you achieved a really, really good success.
Yeah.
Not just for your age. I mean, even if you were like 70 years old at this, point.
Yeah, that's great.
But what do you think, maybe it's a weird question, but I think you're pretty good at answering those types of questions. What do you think you were doing differently? And I can see a lot of things. Like I see a lot of patterns in the way how you do things. So we can talk about some specifics later. But what do you think you're doing differently that people don't generally do that made you in your business successful?
So it's funny. When we sold the company, because one of the interesting things is like when we came to the acquisition, we'd been approached by a bunch of different companies anyway. And then we appointed like an M&A bank to basically run the whole process. And again, it just became quite a hotly competitive deal. And we picked the one that we thought, had the best chance of growth, had the best, everything. And I remember when I turned to my co-founder and I was like, right, we're doing this deal. And one of the things that I found really interesting was like, we never actually even entertained the thought of the business not being acquired. Like, it almost just never crossed our mind that, a business could fail, right? Or, there could not be an acquisition. Because remember, for a lot of companies, it's not so much that they fail or they sell. It's just like they just keep going on and on and on and on, and then they then get a new CEO, and then it just kind of keeps going on. It just did not even cross our minds that it was possible that a company would not be acquired. So I think that kind of like single-mindedness really helped us a lot to just almost see the world as just, this is the outcome. This has to happen. I also think one thing that we did very well was that we picked a market in which we didn't have to be geniuses to win. like in the influencer space, we grew quite quickly. We grew quite well because we were good at a particular position, right? So we focused on the Gen Z audience. We focused on like the new media, emerging media. And I was very good at things like sales and marketing and building funnels and public speaking and all that stuff. And fundamentally, what I had done was I had applied those skills that I learned and I built, and I'd applied it in an industry in which everyone was playing on a lower level, right? So it's almost like if you're the person getting an A whilst everyone is getting a C or a B, then then you're going to win. And the reason why you're going to win is because you just come to the game with like superior skills, superior knowledge, superior expertise. And I think that was definitely one of the big things that helped was almost we got into, a game in which like the agency game in which most people don't know how to market themselves. Most people don't know how to like really sell that well. They're all hitting stuff with cold email and LinkedIn outbound and all that stuff. And we're building these like complicated funnels and all that stuff, which bring people in and they do that and they do that. So I think that was yeah, sorry. And then they do this and then they do that. So I think that was one of our biggest competitive advantages was that we picked a market in which skills wise we were better than most people. And then I think if you compare that with almost this single mindedness of just not even thinking there was a possibility that this would not be the outcome, both the mental and also the tactical, I think a combination of those really helped us.
It's really interesting that you say, not being acquired was not even something that you considered. Well, on the other side, for a lot of people, I think failure is the first thing that's actually stopping them from even starting something sometimes, right? They're like, well, the chances of success are slim and, what if we don't make it? Is that, I think you tweeted the other day that what you see in successful founders is often they have a
Yeah,
superiority
yeah.
complex, right? That they just feel like they're just better and they're just going to succeed one way or another. Is
Yeah.
that something that just comes natural to you, or is that something you kind of acquired?
So I think that I had to acquire this idea of a superiority complex because I think, when I was younger, I would be the person who in school will get the best grades, right? And then when I went to boarding school, when I went to sixth form, it was like, wow, everyone else is much more intelligent than me. So then I tried to figure out what other game I could play, which was the business game, because all these guys wanted to go to Oxford, Cambridge, and all these places. And I was like, cool, well done, good for you. But like, I don't want to play that game. So then I decided to play a different game, which is when I started my company Entrepreneur Express, which then ended up being acquired. So I think if you think about before sixth form, I had built a mental reputation of being the smart guy. And then also when it then came to sixth form, I had basically, gone the other way and been like, well, actually, I'm the most entrepreneurial guy. I think what that basically created was just this perpetuating mindset of like, I am better, I am better, I am better. And I don't think it came from a point of ego. I think it came from a point of I have past experiences which show that I have been able to be better. And so
Mm.
if I have past experiences which show that, then that's my reality, right? It's just like, that's just the way that I live. Um, and I think because of that, as that just keeps getting um, reiterated with every new challenge and with every new thing in Fanbytes, I was like, okay, that's fine. Got over that one. Okay, challenge, got over that one. And that just, constantly creates that new sense of self. And so it was definitely something that I had to cultivate over time, something that I had to have enough beliefs um,
Hmm.
in order to then make that leap. But once I got it, and once I almost kept feeding it with more things, um, I just approach everything now with, well, someone's got to be good at it, and so therefore, if someone's got to be good at it, let me just like figure out how they were good at it, and then
Hmm.
just do what they do.
that's one of my favorite hacks that I've learned. They're just so crazy because it's something I never thought about. It's crazy how often you can just find somebody who already did something you want to do and
Mm,
just learn how they did it and just do that thing. And I think that's one of the biggest hacks in business or in life.
in
And that
life,
also when I had
definitely.
in life, right? When I had Dan Murray Surder on the podcast, he said the same thing. He was like, "Look, if there's one hack that helped me be successful, it was just finding the people who have done the thing I want to do, and just asking them a lot of questions." And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think even, because I know when the first time that we met, when you were talking about the things you were doing around like driving traffic and lead gen and just like being able to understand how to take consumers from A to B, I was like, well, you could apply that skill to any other thing and you'd be successful at it because you now have several examples of you being successful at other things, right? Um, and I think one of the problems that I see a lot, which messes up with a lot of people, is that they think that they have to be the best at something. And I actually don't think that you have to be the best at something. I think what you have to be is like better than the next person and better than average, right? And so actually, if you focus on almost like being better at average, at being better than average, at any skill, at anything, you start to realize that one, it's actually much easier to do that than trying to be the best. And a lot of the rewards would actually come to you because you're also like better than average, right? So, for example, I don't think I'm the best public speaker in the world, but I think I'm better than most public speakers. I don't think I'm the best salesperson in the world, but I think I'm better than most salespeople. And so, because I'm, because I'm significantly better than a lot of people at other things, that is why I get, I guess, disproportionate amount of the rewards because my aim is not to be the best public speaker ever or the best salesperson or the best marketer ever. Fuck, I'm even sure that you're probably a better like internet marketer than me, and that's fine because I also realize that I can play different games, like the public speaking game, the fundraising game. And
mm-hmm.
I think that's a big hindrance that is in people's minds where they almost go like, "Oh my god, the gap to be the best is so high that I'm not gonna try." Whereas actually, it should almost be, how good could you be? You just want to be better than average. And if you're better than average, actually the rewards are pretty significant.
And I think especially when you combine, if you're better than average in three or four or five different things, and when you start
Yeah.
combining those, then what I think Naval said, become the best in the world at what you do, but keep redefining what you do
Yeah.
until you are the best in the world. And that whole
Yeah.
redefining thing, I think often is just combining different things, right?
100%. Yeah.
Is it for you? So you are, as you said, you're like pretty good public speaker and salesperson and marketer, communicator in general. I would say that you're just in general a good communicator. You always have stories to tell. You're always good, with kind of facilitating things and explaining frameworks. When it comes to all those skills, do you think a lot of it is talent and you just discovered the things that you're talented at, or do you just find what you think you need to be good at and just nerd about it and learn it a lot and obsess about it?
So I think that I nerd out on a lot of things. Yeah, so I think for me, I nerd out on a lot of things in a short period of time. So, for example, I think it was probably 2018 when it was the second year of Fanbyte, and I just randomly stumbled across Russell Brunson and Traffic Secrets, and I was like, oh sorry, .com Secrets, and I thought, that's interesting. There's a whole world of lead magnets and quiz funnels and all that stuff. And the moment that I just understood the scale of it in terms of what really is the opportunity if you understand about funnels, then I just dove in and I read everything. I read everything by Chet Holmes, Jay Abraham, Dan Kennedy, yeah, Russell Brunson, Dean Graziosi. And it's not so much because of the stuff they were talking about, but it's the structure with which they put things. So I think that is something that generally I do very well, is that I think I have a high degree of intensity about things, which means that generally I may be able to compound my learning in a shorter period of time because I just
Mm.
have the huge intensity about something. Like right now, I'm fascinated by storytelling and how people tell great stories. And if I look at my Kindle now, the last books, I've probably bought about 8 books now just on the storytelling. I just listen to them. From now or after this call, I'm intentionally walking home because then I can listen to it, and then I'll listen to it at the gym, and then I'll listen to it when I brush my teeth. So I'll be done with a book by tomorrow when I started it today, right? So I
Mm.
think that's just one thing that I try and do a lot, which is just how do you compound your growth in a shorter period of time? So that's generally the approach I take for anything.
You know, that's a pattern that I often see among other friends who are very successful. That they don't say, "Oh, this year I'm going to learn storytelling." It's like, no, I'm obsessed about storytelling right now, and for the next month or maybe 2 months, I'm going to be obsessing about it, and I'll find the best books about it, and I'll listen to podcasts
Yeah.
about it, and I'll take a course about it, and I'll like
Yeah.
talk to my friends about it, and then I think it's so much more valuable because you really the intensity. I think because of that intensity, you're immersed in that subject for that short period of time, rather than just the subject being something that's kind of at the back of your mind
Kind of
for a
interesting.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because remember, like the end goal is not to be the best at a certain thing, is to be better than average. And so if you actually compound your learning, you can learn a lot of stuff which would make you better than the average person at that. If your aim was to be the best, yes, that's not something that you can compound in 3, 4, 5 months. It's something that probably takes 3, 4, 5, even longer than that in years. Uh, but because the focus, because the end goal is that, that's why I tend to favor more of that intensity angle.
Mm. How do you? So if I think about myself,
Mm.
time management is always a problem, right? So you know, yeah, you wanna learn something, or you wanna get your hands dirty with something new, but it's like,
Mm.
man, all the other things, and then obviously, so you were growing Fanbytes, and I know that you always had a bunch of side hustles, and how do you manage your time?
I manage my time very horribly, and I actually do not
I,
have
I
anything to
don't believe
say.
that.
I, I I manage my time incredibly horribly, and I don't actually have anything to add on this topic. The reason, the thing is, I have a lot of things that I'm generally interested in, and so because I have a lot of things that I'm generally interested in, I kind of like go where my curiosity takes me, which I think is probably the reason why. Um, it was it was incredibly important that I had my co-founder Ambrose running Fanbytes, because Ambrose is very much like Mr. Spreadsheet, Mr. Process, Mr. Ops, and all that stuff. Um, and and that was very important. So time management is just not something that I'm particularly great at. I've tried to become better, and it's funny that you say that you don't believe me, because I think most people who are listening to this would not believe me, right? Because they'll just be like, surely this guy's the most, time efficient, da da da. But I'm just so terrible at it. And I think that's actually fine, right? Because, there's some people who say, wake up at this time, make sure you worked out, make sure you've done all that stuff. My approach is more like, by the time I go to bed, does the stuff get done? Yes. Okay, done. Right. There's actually a very funny framework that I have with my friends when I go to the gym. So, our friend Josh, I go to the gym with him, and we'd be doing reps, and they'll be quite difficult, or they'll be quite painful, and we're doing some kind of compound exercise. And let's say the time is, I don't know, 10:57, right? And he'll be not procrastinating, but he may be slowing down, or I may be slowing down, etc. And my whole thing would be, okay, at some point, the time is going to be 10:59. right? And by 10:59, if we just continue doing the thing that we're continuing, we'd be finished by then. So don't really care about like the actual thing that we're doing now. Just assume by 10:59 we'd be done. And
Uh-huh.
so if that's the case, then just put in the effort now because
Mm,
there is no world like
yeah.
10:59 is going to go and come anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well do the stuff now so that at 10, at 10:59 you're just chilling.
Mm,
Um, and I think that I take that mentality to work, which is, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to go to bed. Um, if I if these 4 or 5 things are done, I don't really care when they're done. I don't really care how they're done, but like they will be done. So
mhm.
the end of the day is going to come. It will be done, and so just do it. That's
Yeah.
kind of my approach.
Cool. So yeah, I think it's a very good point that you made. Maybe you're not good at time management, but what you did was if that's, let's say, if that's your weakness, you basically surrounded yourself with people who handle that for you, right? So basically you
Yeah,
found it, you got two co-founders, and one of them, as you said, he's Mr. Spreadsheet, he's your COO, right? And he takes care
exactly.
of all the more
Everything.
structured stuff that maybe you're not that suited for. So yeah,
Yeah,
you got to play on your strengths and understand your weaknesses as well, right? And kind of deal with them, handle them in some way.
yeah. And that was a big mental shift that I went through when beforehand I thought the play was to be an all-rounder. And then I think probably around 19, 20, I just thought I could be an all-rounder, but I'm choosing not to be an all-rounder. As in, I have weaknesses and I just can't be bothered to try and improve them.
Uh-huh.
Rather than I have weaknesses that I can't improve. And that was quite a big mental shift for me.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult mental shift to make because we always notice the weaknesses and we're like, man, I really suck at this. I should probably
Yeah,
fix that somehow. But the reality is, you probably shouldn't. It's probably better if you just play on your strengths and kind of get better at that, right? And you become not just a little bit, not just suck a little bit less at something, but you play on your strengths and actually become better than average at things that you're kind of
100%.
naturally better at, right?
Yeah, the game is to be better than average.
That's, I think that's one of the big lessons from this episode today so far.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I realized that you're also pretty good at is just getting the word out there. I suppose, or getting attention, or like being out there. I
Brand
think
PR,
you
all that stuff.
managed to build, yeah, like you're obviously, so I think you're pretty big on LinkedIn. I don't use LinkedIn that
Yeah.
much, but I think you're pretty big there, right?
Yeah. I'm a
Um,
LinkedIn top voice,
there
top
you
10
go.
most followed. There you go. Boom.
So you're LinkedIn top voice. You were in Forbes 30 under 30. You were
Yeah.
in all the tech and marketing
Yeah.
magazines and newspapers that you can think of. Was that very much also part of the strategy to just like get the word out about the business?
Yeah. So I think at the beginning of Fanbytes, we were starting at the beginning when uh, influencer marketing was still seen as a bit of a weird thing, right? And so because of that, you needed to almost believe in the future of influencers as well, right? So it couldn't just be a sales thing where it's like, right, here's a product, here's the benefits, da da da. So as a consequence of that, I then decided that actually I was going to tell the story of influencer marketing and how we can change brands and how we can do X, Y, Z. And then I found out I was good at it. And then what ends up happening with PR, with everything, is that it further compounds, right? So I think I had a lot of things going for me, which was I was telling a very interesting story. I was also good at it, but also I was generally an interesting story, right? People were always interested in the 21, 22-year old who was building a company. People were interested in the whole idea of a Gen Z entrepreneur helping brands understand Gen Z. There was all that kind of compounding narrative. And then at some point, it just becomes a perpetuating thing, right? If, you know, I was in Wide magazine, and they did this whole photo shoot and all that stuff. And that just came because they'd seen me in a bunch of other places, right?
Mm,
And so it just compounds over time. But at the beginning, it was very much a here's a story that we have to tell because we can't just win on product alone. So we have to actually
mm,
win by painting the picture, painting the story. And I think the other thing I also realized was, in general in business, and I'm a very competitive person, in general in business, if you're coming to a fight and everyone is bringing a knife, you need a bazooka, right? So you can't just come with like a longer knife, right? It's like, okay, everyone's got knives. And I realized that a lot of my competitors, they didn't have anyone who was good at public speaking. And so they didn't have anyone who was actually completely fine with just going out on stage, improv, talking to all these people. And so they had sales teams, we had sales teams. They had campaign teams, we had campaign teams. They had tech, we had tech. And so that's the example of like, they had a knife, we had a knife, da 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 da, right? But the one thing that they didn't have was like they didn't have a charismatic spokesperson who could speak on stage. So they didn't have that gun. And so one of the things I started thinking about in 2018 was how do we load up a lot of guns, right? So it could be me doing public speaking. It could be our positioning as, Gen Z experts whilst they're all broad. It could be, for example, in 2020, we built like the TikTok house, the whole, get TikTokers to come and live in a house and create content. That drove more PR. Like those were all guns basically that we're bringing to the fight. And that was kind of the motivation and the inspiration behind the whole public speaking. It was very tactical and sorry, it was very strategic at the beginning, but then after a while, it just became quite a compounding thing.
You know what's interesting about you? It's a lot of people, they're like older than you and they're still completely lost. They're like, I don't really know what I'm doing and I don't know what I'm good at and I don't know what I want to be good at. You were 20 and it seemed like you had a lot of clarity on these are my strengths and these are the opportunities and this is what we're doing and here's how we can be better than competitors. Here are like competitors' weaknesses. Do you think, is that all your intuition? Do those things just come to you, or do you spend a lot of time, I don't know, in the shower thinking or taking mushrooms and brainstorming, or like what's?
No, I think part of it, right, is like let me think. Hang on, just thinking through. Yeah, so I think part of it is definitely that hindsight is 2020, right? And there was definitely a part of it which was, oh, after I'd done my first talks, I then realized this was a very big competitive advantage. So therefore, I did more talks rather
Mm,
than I decided to do more talks because of this very elaborate plan, etc. So I think it's not so much that I'm good at planning and then executing. I think it's once I've started executing, I'm then good at being able to discern what to amplify and what to reduce, right? So, a very good example. When we started Fanbytes, the whole idea was like, influencer marketing and all that stuff. And then in 2018, I started to realize that the brands that we were really driving were the Gen Z brands. And so then I said,
mm,
right, we're going to orient the company towards being a Gen Z focused company, right? So it's more that we get to execute and then I go, okay, that's interesting. Let's now, write the ship this way. And that's
mhm.
where I think that I've been able to have some kind of success.
All right. So you execute on a lot of different things and then you're quite quick at just identifying what seems to be working and then you just really double down on those things.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
kind of it?
yeah. Because I don't, funny enough, and again, this may seem very counterintuitive to other founders, etc. I don't set really high goals, right? I don't set, again, I go back to even the way that we funded the business. It was all angels. We didn't take any VCs. I didn't set a goal to build $1 billion company. I didn't set a goal to even build $100 million company. I didn't set a goal to have, 300 people. I set not even so much realistic goals. I set goals that I know that 80% of the time I will achieve, right? Um, which is funny because, maybe to some degree you could be like, well, if you set a goal to sell Fanbytes for 100 million, you could have. But I also don't think we could have because the vehicle that we had of the tech and then the services was not a vehicle that would get to 100 million. But I knew very comfortably get to whatever 30 plus million, blah, blah, blah. Like I knew that would be, the vehicle that it can get to. Um, so I don't set really big goals. I just set goals that I know, I have an 80% chance of winning. And and that's it.
Interesting. Okay, so this was a lot about Timo and what makes Timo successful and how you function. One thing that was always interesting about you to me as well was the side hustles, right? Which I mentioned already a little bit before, because I think you always had a bunch of projects that we often talked
Yeah,
about as
yeah,
well, like this and that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I don't really know that much. I know about a few examples that we talked about, but
yeah. Yeah,
um,
so
yeah.
do you know what? Most of the side hustles seem random unless you recognize there's like a common thread, which is how do you become a better marketer? So, for example, I started a side hustle about gardening and newsletters, and that was basically a newsletter that I grew, and it was all around gardening. I don't care about gardening. I don't know anything much about gardening. But for me, I had seen that newsletters were doing well, and I was fascinated by the idea of driving audiences for a newsletter. I have built e-commerce brands based off TikTok, and that was intentional because I was like, "Oh, TikTok is rising. I get the influencers, I get the e-commerce. Let me go try it." Um, and the objective was not so much how do I build something big from this, it was how do I become a better marketer from it. Because I really, even now, I don't think I'm as great a marketer as I could be. Um, and so I do all of these kind of things, or I did all of these things to flesh out my marketing capabilities. Because remember, when we sold Fanbytes was 70 people. The year before that, let's say we were, I don't know, 60 people. When you are the founder of a 60-person business, you're not in the trenches doing the work, and you shouldn't be in the trenches doing the work. So you need something to kind of keep honing your skills, etc. And that's what all these side hustles were.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. I like that approach. How do you approach it now? So if you start a side hustle now, so obviously you got certain skills and certain approach to how
Mm,
you do things. If you
yeah,
let's say that you start a new, I don't know whether it's like a TikTok e-commerce site or
yeah.
is it a newsletter, what would be your approach?
So my approach now is actually incredibly different to what my approach would have been before the acquisition. My approach now would actually be I need to find somebody who I can work with on this. And the reason why is because the thing I'm optimizing for is, yes, to become a good marketer, but it's also I really enjoy working with people and, small groups of highly intelligent A players. I love that. And so if I was building something, what I would do would be I would say, right, who do I know who could be quite good for this? Let's work together on this. Um, which I think was very different to earlier, where earlier I would just go, well, let me just do it, let me just try it. Because now layering on top of I want to be a better marketer, etc. Layering on top of it is actually I just want to build cool stuff with cool people. You know, So that's probably the way that I'd approach it. And I think a big part of it is, the luxury of not needing something to really work. It's just fun and it's vibes. So if it's fun and it's vibes, then you definitely need to just be around the right people to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree. Where do you see opportunities now? So you mentioned, there were newsletters that you got obsessed about at some point. There were TikTok e-commerce brands. What do you think are some interesting opportunities now, if there's anything you can share?
I don't know. I mean, that's a question for you. Where do you think the opportunities are now? The thing is, I'm all out of. I'm just trying to find the cool people who are doing cool things and then do cool things with them.
Mm.
um, uh, where do you think the opportunities are now?
I do think that TikTok is still a big opportunity. I think TikTok is
Yeah,
still not even, for many brands, it's just starting, right? And the whole
yeah,
advertising platform is still very kind of basic. And I think there's a lot that's going to happen there, both
mm,
for people to build brands on top of TikTok, as well as people to build tools for TikTok, right? Whether it's
yeah.
all sorts of SaaS businesses, kind of, I suppose you could look at it the same things that were at some point built on top of Instagram or
Facebook and all
Facebook or
that.
other
Yeah,
social media. The same things are eventually going to be built on top of TikTok, right? So it's just about observing and I suppose finding the right timing for those.
yeah. I agree.
There's obviously loads happening with AI right now. I think AI is going to change everything when it comes to content generation, especially generating both images and
Text and
copy
stuff.
as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
that just
like
over the last
GPT-3 and
30,
stuff like that.
yeah, that was just over the last 30 days or so. It just exploded, right? The things that you can generate
Mm,
and the progress that we're seeing there. So again, probably just a lot of tools that can be created. I actually feel that's gonna disrupt a lot of industries
mm.
in the next months, but years
Oh
for
wow.
sure.
Okay. Months.
Because
Okay.
there's somebody just created a website that generates stock photos. So instead of
Yeah.
stock photos cost, they cost quite a bit to produce, right? You need the whole setup and all the items and you need to pay the people and so on. So yeah, that
Mm.
is a decent chunk of investment required there. And somebody now built a site where you generate them with AI. So they're not perfect yet, but I don't know, give it another few months. The progress there is insanely fast right now. And some of it is open source. So there's a bunch of geeks that just jumped on it and
And they
they
just did
keep
it. Yeah.
improving it day by day. So, you can now probably create or sell stock photos at a fraction of a price, right?
Yeah. There's an idea I had just randomly was who's doing stuff like print on demand for AI generated photos, right? So,
Uh-huh.
because I think it's cool to have to be able to see the pictures and to be able to see the photos online. I remember seeing one and it was like Elon Musk does XYZ, and it's just quite
Yeah.
funny cartoons and
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, well, surely the next thing is then to turn it into a poster,
Yeah.
which anyone can buy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually thinking about it at some point. I never got around to doing it, but most of Elon Musk's tweets is like you could print them out and somebody would want to buy them. Maybe not most, but like
Yeah,
30% of them probably, because it's
yeah,
something like ridiculous, silly, whatever, right?
yeah.
You could literally just generate those and reply to them immediately. So it obviously just have software that generates like a
Mm.
cup or a photo or like whatever with that tweet printed on it. And just reply to the original tweet and somehow
Yeah. GPT-3 is one of those things. I have a friend who I'm helping at the moment to launch his thing. He's kind of, doing GPT-3 for copywriting and all that stuff. And it's one of those businesses where I go, you are at the beginning of a wave. Like you truly are at the beginning of a wave. There is a business here in effectively just applying the same technology of being able to simplify copy, but just do it in several different industries, right?
yeah,
Simplify copy for CPG brands and their listings. Simplify copy for agencies and the copywriting for their brands. Simplify copy for, like so many things there. So it's an interesting opportunity. Very good shout, actually. Very good shout.
There's a tool which I am blanking on the name right now. I can't remember. I'll see if I can find it. But there's a tool that generates ad banners. So basically Facebook ad banners with AI as well. So you provide, I think you provide like your logo and the brand name and some claims that you want to have or whatever. And then it just generates banners for you. Obviously, again, for way cheaper than it would cost if you had a designer. And it was recommended to me by at least 2 or 3 marketers now, and they all said that it's incredibly good. So, those things will really change things in the very near term future. So yeah, I guess that's an interesting one. I don't know, loads of other things.
Yeah, I mean, generally I found with all these type of technologies and industries and all that stuff that you just want to be in a way where all you have to do is just not die, right? Um, again, rather than trying to figure out, I have some really cool smart friends, and when they're thinking about business ideas, there's always something mad complex, like a fintech thing, or like a crypto, or like a climate change thing. I'm like, dude, man, just what are you doing? Just pick something relatively easy. You are way smarter than me. You are way more kind of switched on. Go play in a game where you are obviously on top, and then win in that game, and then go do the other stuff. But everyone wants to be on TechCrunch. That's the problem with these guys. Everybody wants to be on TechCrunch. Everybody wants has raised 100 million to take on the climate. It's like, hey, get money first, and then afterwards you get the stuff.
Dude, I know. I mean, I used to be like that, and it's funny because my kind of business career started by working for a startup accelerator, and that was the only thing I knew. It's like, well, that was the definition of business for me. It has to be startup. It has to be, aiming to become a unicorn. It has to it has to raise money, change the world. That's business. I didn't know anything else. Funny, and then, well, eventually I learned that that's like a very small percentage of businesses. A tiny percentage of them, exactly. I grew up, luckily. A tiny percentage of those are successful. And so, I mean, mad respect to everyone who does that. But it's also just, you need to be aware that the chances that you're actually going to make it are super slim, and it's like really, really hard. Small, and, there are other ways to do business, right?
Yeah. Take care of yourself first, and then afterwards, what's the phrase? There's a phrase that I saw. It's like first you change yourself, then you change the world, right?
There you go. Yeah. There's another. I don't know if that's true, but there's supposedly a Russian proverb that says, "Never ask a man how he made his first million," meaning that, look, that first million is always, either something sketchy or embarrassing or like.
Yeah. At one point, okay, I'm just gonna share this. At one point, before Fanbytes and the acquisition and everything else, for like a week, I had probably for 2 weeks, I had like 7 figures liquid before like way before the acquisition, and it was all from crypto. and then the thing went down, and it was like, oh well, I guess it was fun for those 2 weeks. But it's funny, right? Because the way that it happened was not something that I'm incredibly proud of. Like, there was no rug pulls or anything like that, but how I got into the deals were a bit off. So when people ask me how I made my first million, I go, it was Fanbytes. Because I don't want to talk about the previous thing. It's funny phrase.
But I think it's good kind of mindset to have. It's like, look, man, just first learn how to make money some way, then go and change the world and like do the grandiose things, because that's often way harder. And I think you're gonna have significantly higher chances of actually doing that later when you have some capital and when you have some experience, rather than just like jumping into that when you're young, getting experience, and you don't know what you're doing.
I think way more capital, way more experience, but also way more like social proof. It's far easier for people to want to come and work with you if you are already a proven success. It's far easier for investors to want to back you if you have a good track record. Like, it almost feels like people can't think long term enough. And that really frustrates me when I listen to people and I'm like, where do you think this business is going to go? And they say, okay, 100 million. It's like, right, okay. You run a bakery. Okay, what are you doing, right? Just be aware of the vehicle that you're in, and don't be embarrassed by the vehicle that you're in. Because I think, for example, for me at the beginning of Fanbytes, I really wanted to build some like tech platform which does all these things, SaaS, etc. And eventually, I kind of realized it's like, well, mate, the market that you're in is not tech, SaaS, etc. Because you have whatever Nike are trying to pay you whatever 50 grand, 100 grand. They're not going to spend it on a tech SaaS platform. They're going to spend it on tech enabled services. So just go where that path is going to be. And I used to be a bit embarrassed at the beginning because I was like, oh, all my friends are doing SaaS and they're raising, etc. And then I remember this was probably in 2018. I was like, cool, they're all doing that, but they're all trying to get these insane outcomes. And respectfully, I'm going to end up being richer than them. And, I'm not saying, life is all about, money and stuff, because it's not. But also in the game of business, the scorecard is money. And if the end goal is money, and I'm more likely to win that game because of the vehicle that I've chosen, then there's nothing to be embarrassed about. By the way, I said 6:30, but I've actually got more time.
Let's keep going then.
Yeah. I've got probably till 6:57 basically.
Perfect. All right. What was I going to say? Right. Where did we end now?
We're talking about people not needing to go for the crazy stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned a few times, so you said, you want to, now moving forward, you want to surround yourself with smart people. You want to, and I think that's what you generally do. I think, also like when we met, right? You invite a bunch of us to your founder's house. And I feel like you're generally good at surrounding yourself with smart and interesting people. And that's something that I personally think about quite a lot as well. Because I think to me, that's the best hack in life to learn things, pick up that ambition from people as well, the mindset from people, and find people to collaborate with as well, as you said. Do you have any other kind of hacks that you use to surround yourself with interesting people? I think one thing that I obviously see with you is, you post stuff on social media, you do cool stuff. I usually say, look, the best way to attract cool people is just do cool shit.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one, right? Like, be someone other people want to actually hang out with rather than forcing them to. But I think also, it's to just be helpful. By that, I mean, I often will someone will come to me for something, and I often will just help them, not because I say, I've helped you now, you help me next time. But I think I'm actively out to help people, and not just in business, but just in life. A friend of mine told me about his friend who had like a knee injury, and so what I did was afterwards I connected them to like an osteopath, right? And And I remember when I did that, he was just like, "What the heck? Why'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, you needed some help, and your friend needed some help. Therefore, I helped." So I think I'd say built a reputation as like someone who genuinely wants to help, um, because I know somewhere down the line, if it's 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, um, there will be some way that it will come
Mm,
back. So I'm quite bullish on that.
mm. Yeah, and even if not all of it comes back, right? Some of it comes back, and sometimes that pays off 10 times over. It's
100%.
interesting. I think it's that sort of kind of abundance mindset as well that I often see in people like
Mm,
yourself, and something that I personally had to learn. I don't think I was naturally like that,
100%, yeah.
but I've seen that in some of my friends who are doing really well in life, and they just share constantly and help constantly. They get, I don't know, access to this new community, and they're like, oh, let me tell you all the things I
That's
learned there, or
right,
let me give you access if it's something that's online, or tools, or like courses or whatever, right? Stuff that's
yeah.
being helpful to them, and especially stuff that doesn't cost anything if you
Yeah,
just share it. All it
yeah,
costs is like 10 seconds of time when you send it to
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
else,
yeah.
right?
You're quite good at that though, because I remember when we spoke about the e-com stuff, and you actually went out of your way to say, "Oh, actually, this guy would be good," and then you gave him my number, and you kind of, briefed him on some stuff, etc. And I thought, wow, that's very cool because you actively went out of your way to do it and all that stuff. And I thought that's that's a very good trait because at some point, I mean, even by and large, this podcast, right, is a good example of how your action led to this action, which led to that action, etc. And you said that you're not, naturally good at it. And I also don't think anyone is naturally good at it. I think most
Mm,
people grow up with a scarcity mindset because
mm,
you are a human being. And as human beings, we have a scarcity mindset because we've all descended from, whatever, apes and stuff, where it's like mine is mine and yours is yours. And
yeah.
so, by definition, you have to almost train yourself to think counterintuitively. So I don't think it comes to anyone naturally. I think that you actively have to keep doing it, see the benefits of it all the time, and then go, right, I'm going to do more of this.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, and I do a lot of it. Yeah, kind of just as you said, because I think at some point it's going to come back, or if it's not, to some extent it will. And
Yeah.
a concept that I've learned about recently is, what is it? Expanding your luck surface area, which is basically
Oh,
just
that's
like
cool. That's a cool idea.
sharing what you do and helping others, and
Mm,
that's how you kind of expand your luck. And I think
that's good.
that's how what I consider also, meeting people and just kind of being out there. And the more you're out there, yeah, sometimes you're going to attract something negative, obviously, but you have to build that
Mm,
thick skin for that. But you're also going to attract opportunities, right? One way or another.
mm.
And that's
Yeah.
by, oh yeah, by helping others, by meeting people, and yeah, but just putting yourself out there, which obviously, I mean, you know that very much.
Yeah. Expanding your luck service area. That's a very cool phrase. I like it.
Yeah. Um, one one question. What would you say is your number one book or person or course or some kind of experience that you think impacted your life the most? Or if it's multiple of them, we can also talk about multiple of them because sometimes it's not just one thing.
Yeah. Book. So I think that I probably had three. One was a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. I think that I've spoken
Aha.
about it on a few podcasts before. Psycho-Cybernetics. Have you heard of it?
Yes, I have. And
Yeah.
I don't think I've read the whole thing, but I've read part of it. I've
Yeah.
heard that many of the sort of personal development books are kind of written on top of it.
Centered on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is. It is quite a dense book, but it's one of those books where it's. I highly recommend it, I mean, the first thing is there's so many different YouTube channels that are based on it, but I think there's something great about just actively reading it. It's quite dense. Um, I thought that book was amazing because it spoke about self-image and about how your mind almost has a mind map, and so mine has a mind map as to what your reality is, etc., and you can change that reality. And I find that really interesting. In fact, I think earlier this week I spoke about how I passionately hate when people say, find yourself. And actually, I believe that you should create yourself.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think that distinction is very important for people who allow life to happen to them rather
Hmm.
than them happening to life. The second book is So Good They Can't Ignore You.
On finding yourself, sorry for interrupting you, but
Yeah,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
completely agree with you on that. I think it's such a mistake or such a shame that finding yourself is this phrase that people hear about, and then they go and search for themselves, and like you just, I don't know, go soul searching, or just like think about, or
Yeah,
just wait. You just kind of wait for
yeah,
your life purpose to find you. But I don't think it's like that. I think you need to just like make a decision, or like, well, this is going to be my mission in life. This is what I'm going to be doing. And then you just go in that direction. I don't think it just finds
yeah.
you. I think you do stuff, and then you kind of see what, feels right, and you make a decision. You're like,
Yeah.
here's where I'm going.
The reason why finding yourself is so popular is because it gives you a reason to surrender agency of your life.
Uh-huh.
If you say that you have to find yourself, that means there's like something there and it's waiting for me and it's already predestined and basically I just have to find it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the second one is So Good They Can't Ignore You. It's written by a guy called Cal Newport. Um, I absolutely love it, and the reason why is because it focuses on skill acquisition. The whole point is how do you build a successful life? How do people talk about love what you do, that's the secret to success and all that. And it's like, well, actually, it's not so much, or, people talk about passion, and actually, you get passion from being good at skills, and you
Uh-huh.
get passion by being good at like rare and valuable skills, which then gives you autonomy over your life. And it's that autonomy that you like. And so it really taught me about rare and valuable skills. And then I think the third book was Dot-Com Secrets. I think the book by Russell Brunson just opened up my entire eyes to like, oh, you know, there is a science to being able to drive traffic. There is
Uh-huh.
a method. And and those three were probably the most shape shifting, or I guess mindset shifting books that I read.
Do you know, have you heard of Nothing Held Back community?
No, nothing like that.
Dude, I think you would love that. Um,
Is it on Reddit
it's a
or something?
Facebook. That's a Facebook group. Um,
Nothing like that.
I'll send you the links,
Yeah.
and I can send you some of their stuff. And it's, well, it's a little bit similar to Russell Brunson stuff. Different. So it's very heavily focused on copywriting, but it's not just. It's
Okay.
like it originates from copywriting, but it's really about business
Nothing
in
held back.
general and marketing. And I think you're gonna love their stuff.
Okay. Nothing held back. Yeah, it's a Facebook group. It's a
Yeah.
WhatsApp group as well.
And they've got, so the guy, he wrote a few books as well. Well, he wrote one book. I think he's writing his second book now. He's got
Yeah.
this whole community thing, and just, he shares loads of stuff for free
Okay.
anyways on the Facebook group. And
Cool.
I think you'll find it pretty interesting.
I just checked it out. I've just asked to join the book. Join the group.
Cool.
Very cool.
Cool. Um, so I started laughing. So the second book that you mentioned was So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. You said it's about skill acquisition, and that's something that I was kind of digging into a lot at the beginning of the podcast, because I felt like you're so good at certain things, and I was trying to get to how you became so good at them. And now I kind of feel like maybe the book is part of the answer at that.
Yeah, the book is definitely part of the answer, and I think I kind of, I'm really amazed by this idea of what is called neuroplasticity, right? And how
Uh-huh.
your brain is constantly evolving. You can evolve your brain and all those things. I'm just fascinated by the idea that you are perpetually in beta, right? Like you're just constantly improving every single time. I just find that whole idea just incredible. And I think, for example, I've just got this Fitbit, and I've just become a bloody rabbit now where I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna walk, I'm just gonna walk, I'm just gonna walk. And it's like I'm just constantly trying to beat my last thing over and over again. Because I'm just thinking about constant improvement. But it's not to, compete against anyone. It's just to go, well, how good could you be? I think that I may actually get a poster made in my room which just says, how good could you be?
Every morning to remind yourself.
And it's not just about work or business or money. It's how good of a partner could you be to people, right? How
Mm-hmm.
good of a friend could you be to people? How good of a communicator could you be to people? Because there's always an ability to be better. There's always an opportunity to be better.
Yeah. Let's talk about wealth a little bit. I think that's
Okay.
that so your story, which we didn't talk about that much, but you come from a poor family. You were poor when you were a kid, and
Yeah.
then you obviously now came to being very wealthy for your age.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned at some point while we were talking, you said, well, money is not the ultimate thing in life, right? It's
Yeah.
there are a lot of other things. What is wealth for you? Kind of philosophical
So,
now.
so I think the idea of money isn't everything is 100% from a position of luxury because money was everything to me until probably in our fourth year in Fanbytes. Um, I remember, I think it was 1 month. There was a month that we made 1 million in a single month, as in the Fanbytes business. And I thought, wow, I feel no different. Um, and yes, it's great, and yes, success for everyone. But it was the goal, it was the achievement, it was the journey to that was most interesting. So I think 100% that, but is also coming from a position of I actively hated when people would say that. Beforehand, when people would be like, it's not about the money. It's like, well, that's easy for you to say because you're worth 20 billion, mate. Like, duh, right? And now I'm like, oh, yeah, he's kind of right. And that's
It's
why,
one of those things that
yeah.
you don't believe until you actually get
Yeah,
there.
like when people said money doesn't buy happiness. And I actually disagree with that. So I think that it does. I'm significantly happier now um, uh, uh, than I was when I didn't have money. But I also understand the sentiment, which is it wouldn't solve all your problems, right? Which is probably a better way to say it. It's not so much money just doesn't blanket buy happiness. But anyway, talking about wealth, what does it mean to me? So I think it means that you can make decisions from a position of optionality. Like one of the things I'm really excited by is I can work with people on cool things without needing it to work. You know what I mean? Like I can go,
Yeah.
you know what? Let's chuck in 50 grand behind this project. Let's run it for 3, 4, 5 months. If it doesn't work, okay, that's fine.
Mm,
But we learned, etc. That is not possible if I hadn't achieved, I guess, financial freedom, blah, blah, blah. So I think it is really the optionality and decision making that you get, which is what it truly means to me. And under that is time and all that stuff. But really, I think it's just optionality with life in general. There's also a confidence that there's a quiet confidence that comes with wealth. A lot of people don't talk about this, but for example, I find it amazing. Like sometimes if I'm just going to, Tesco or Sainsbury's, I'll be wearing a black t-shirt with like stains in it. I'm wearing a tracksuit, just chilling there. And I'm like, I do not give two shits what anybody thinks about the way that I look now, because
Mm-hmm.
I am very confident in myself, because I know I have achieved whatever 0.001% of people, not even for my age, just in life. Like selling a business for tens of millions, becoming like a multi millionaires, like that's not a thing which most people achieve. And because of that, I become more just confident in who I am. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that can be achieved from, that outcome, but it can also be achieved from just anywhere in your life where you have achieved something significant. It doesn't have to be business, it doesn't have to be, you could be really good at sports. You could be the person who won some like really big cooking competition, right? But if you just have like a self confidence because of past achievements, past successes, that's the way that you just walk around with just this air of I don't need approval,
Yeah.
but not overconfidence, just that you don't need approval. For example, I have a friend who sold this company about 2 years ago, and he's single, and he said something fascinating, which is he realized that the way that he spoke to um, women was very different. Not in a I'm better than you way, not in a, but like he just didn't seek their approval. He also is not like a flashy person, right? But he just didn't seek the approval of them. Because for guys, a lot of things is they're trying to seek the approval of a girl, right? They're like, make sure she notices me, make sure she does that. He just did not feel anything like that. And the reason why was
Mm-hmm.
because, well, he has approval, he has self approval, he has self confidence because of the things that the game he was trying to play, he has won the game. So therefore, he doesn't need to get approval from anyone else.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, right? It's just so much easier to have that confidence and to, I think, to have that positive self-talk. That's something that
Yeah.
you got. It sounds a little bit fluffy, but I think it makes so much sense. Do you keep like telling yourself, "Oh, I suck at this, and I messed up this thing, and I'm not very good at that," or can you genuinely just keep telling yourself that no, I've accomplished certain things,
Yeah.
and I was listening to this. Do you know who's Alex Hormozy?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's all over YouTube and social media recently, right? And he was talking about. He said there's this concept of affirmations, right? Which you wake up in the morning and you're like, I am this, I'm that. And he said that might work, but what works even much better is if you talk to yourself about things that you actually have a proof about,
Yes.
right? And it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a strong proof, and it doesn't
It
need to
just
mean
needs
it doesn't
some
have to
proof.
mean that you were constantly winning at something. You just need to have proof that you are good at something or
Yeah.
decent at something, or that you won once at something, and then you tell that to yourself and kind of silence all those negative
Yeah.
thoughts. And I think that makes a huge difference. And we were talking about confidence before, or superiority complex, right? And how that's important to, I think, just to keep going, or just to give you the confidence to start something. And yeah, I think if you constantly have that voice in your head saying, "Oh, but I don't know if I can do it," yeah,
Mm.
well, then you're not going to do it, right?
Yeah. Because the self, because I mean, to get philosophical, like you have a different reality to me, and the same way we have a different reality to someone. We could be looking at the exact same situation, but it's the stories that we tell ourselves which would change the way that we perceive it, right? And so this is why it's so important to have these proof points and paint a picture to yourself which you want to look at, right? It goes to at the beginning of the interview, or not even this interview because it's more of a conversation. At the beginning of this conversation, where I said, we just did not conceive a world in which the business was not acquired. You know, it was just like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
duh. It's like, well,
Yeah.
what's the other outcome, right? It's like for us, there were four outcomes for business, right? Either the business fails, either the business goes public, either we pass it on to our families, or the business gets acquired. The business was just not going to fail. The business was not, the type of business that goes public. We were 21 and 22 starting a business, so we didn't have any family to pass it on to. So by definition, like the only possible option was for it to be acquired. You know, it's like, well, obviously this is the thing, so just do it.
Wild. It's wild, but it's, yeah, I think that is the way. That is the way. Cool. I think you can wrap up on a kind of philosophical note, which I think is cool. I always like some philosophical questions or discussions as well. So that's cool. I don't know. Was there anything else that you think we forgot to talk about?
No, I really enjoy this because I think, for other podcasts I've done, it's been a bit too like, tell me about your life and how you started, etc. And I quite like the fact that this was very much like conversation, do this, do this, do that. So I think that we covered all bases rather than just a bit of a documentary of your life, which is a bit like, okay, that's nice, but
Yeah,
you can
I
get
didn't want
anywhere.
to do that because I know that there's loads of content about that already, and you're probably tired of those kind of conversations anyway. Plus, yeah, I just prefer to kind of, I suppose, use this opportunity to get to know you better a little bit as well, and just catch
Yeah,
up on life, right?
exactly, exactly. Very cool.
Cool, man. Thanks again for coming on.
No problem.
And yeah, we'll link to all your stuff in the podcast in the description. Fanbytes, and you see also your social media. Yeah, as we said, you're a beast on LinkedIn, so everyone should follow you there. But also on other platforms,
Yeah,
TikTok,
TikTok, on Instagram, and all that jazz. There you go.
and all that jazz. Cool.
All
Thanks,
right,
man.
sweet.
See ya. Thanks for listening until the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like the content, please do me a favor and click the like button on YouTube or give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. Leave a comment, subscribe if you want to hear more from us. That really helps also to get the podcast out there, and that helps me get more interesting guests and create even more interesting content. So I really appreciate it if you do that. If you have any other comments, questions, feel free to message me. You can find me on Twitter. That's usually the best channel. The link should be somewhere in the description. And yeah, check out my Twitter. I try to tweet interesting stuff about similar content that we talk about on the podcast, key insights from the podcast as well, and just generally stuff that I learn and stuff that I do. So see you. Thanks.